When the economy crashed in 2008, 93% of people made the same catastrophic mistake. They let their emotions drive their financial decisions. But here's what's haunting. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, faced something far worse 2,000 years ago. Plague wiped out a third of Rome's population. Wars drained the empire's treasury. Rebellions threatened everything he'd built. Yet, he emerged stronger, richer, and more powerful than before. The difference wasn't luck, connections, or government bailouts. It was one simple principle from Stoic wisdom that most people completely ignore during a crisis. And if you don't understand this principle, your next financial emergency won't just hurt your bank account. It will destroy your future. Right now, someone watching this video is about to lose their job. Someone else just watched their investment portfolio drop by 40%. Another person is staring at bills they can't pay, feeling that familiar knot in their stomach. That whisper, "You're failing. You're not enough. You're going to lose everything." I know because I've been there. We've all been there. But here's what nobody talks about in the endless stream of financial advice, budgeting tips, and get-rich-quick schemes flooding your feed. This video is different. It's deeper. Because the real reason people go broke during a crisis has nothing to do with money itself. It has everything to do with what happens inside your mind when the world starts falling apart. The Stoics understood something about human nature and emotional resilience in finances that modern psychology is just beginning to catch up with. They knew that external circumstances don't determine your fate. Your response to those circumstances does. And they developed a mental framework so powerful that it turned ordinary people into unshakable forces of nature, even when everything around them was collapsing. Epictetus was born a slave, literally owned by another human being. He had no money, no freedom, no choices about his own life. Yet he became one of the wealthiest philosophers in history, not because he inherited anything, not because he got lucky, but because he mastered what he called the fundamental rule of human flourishing. He said, "Some things are within our power, while others are not." That's it. That's the principle that built empires and created fortunes. The dichotomy of control. A practical framework for financial resilience that changes everything. You have complete control over your thoughts, your decisions, your actions, and your responses. You have zero control over the economy, other people's decisions, natural disasters, or market crashes. Most people spend 90% of their mental energy trying to control things they can't control, and 0% focusing on the only things they actually can control. This backwards approach doesn't just waste your energy, it destroys your ability to make intelligent financial decisions when it matters most. When a financial crisis hits, your brain goes into survival mode. Ancient programming kicks in. Fight, flight, or freeze. But here's the problem. Those responses evolved for physical threats, not financial ones. When you panic about money, you're using Stone Age software to solve Space Age problems. The Stoics figured out how to override this programming. They turned crisis into opportunity, obstacles into advantages, and fear into fuel. Not through positive thinking or wishful manifestation, but through practical wisdom that actually works in the real world. Let's start with the biggest mistake people make during financial emergencies. They try to control the uncontrollable. The market crashed, so they frantically check their portfolio every 5 minutes, as if staring at red numbers will somehow make them turn green. They lost their job, so they spend hours obsessing over why the company made cuts. Replaying conversations with their boss, wondering what they could have done differently. They can't pay their bills, so they lie awake at night calculating and recalculating numbers. Numbers that won't change no matter how many times they run them through their head. This is what Stoics called the torture of the uncontrollable. You're spending precious mental resources on things you cannot influence, while ignoring the things you absolutely can influence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." Not because the present is always pleasant, but because the present is the only place where you have any power. When you're worried about losing your house, you can't control the housing market, but you can control your next conversation with your lender. You can't control your company's layoff decisions, but you can control how you spend the next hour building new skills or reaching out to your network. You can't control inflation, but you can control what you buy at the grocery store today. The moment you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, something magical happens. You free up massive amounts of mental energy to focus on what actually matters. This shift in focus and emotional control changes everything about your financial situation. But what if I told you the real solution is even more counterintuitive? Here's where most financial advice gets it completely wrong. They tell you to stay positive, think happy thoughts, visualize success. The Stoics took the opposite approach. They practiced something called negative visualization, deliberately imagining loss before it happened. This is a powerful technique for overcoming financial anxiety. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, would regularly spend days living like he was poor, sleeping on the floor, eating simple food, wearing basic clothes. He wasn't being masochistic. He was building mental muscle for financial resilience. When you voluntarily experience discomfort, you realize that your worst-case scenarios aren't actually that bad. Most of your financial fears are based on imaginary suffering, not real suffering. You're not afraid of being homeless. You're afraid of what people will think if you're homeless. You're not afraid of losing money. You're afraid of losing status, respect, or identity. But when you practice losing these things voluntarily, you discover something liberating. Your happiness doesn't depend on them as much as you thought. This isn't about becoming pessimistic or expecting the worst. It's about removing the power that fear has over your decision-making. When you're no longer desperately afraid of losing what you have, you can make rational choices about how to protect and grow it. Seneca put it perfectly. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" The answer is always no. The reality is never as bad as the fear. But Seneca didn't stop there. He took this principle even further. Now here's where Stoic wisdom becomes immediately practical. When crisis hits, most people make decisions based on emotion, not logic. They panic sell investments at the bottom. They take the first job offer that comes along, even if it's terrible. They cut expenses randomly instead of strategically. They borrow money they can't afford to pay back. They make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. The Stoics had a different approach to emotional control in finances. They separated their initial emotional reaction from their actual response. Epictetus taught a simple but powerful technique: the pause. When something bad happens, you feel it fully for exactly 10 seconds. You don't suppress the emotion. You don't pretend everything is fine. You acknowledge that this sucks and it's okay to feel upset about it. Then you ask one question: what does this situation require of me? Not what do I want to do, not what would make me feel better, not what would be easiest. What does this situation actually require for the best possible outcome? When you get laid off, the situation requires you to immediately assess your financial runway. Update your resume and start networking. It doesn't require you to spend 3 days feeling sorry for yourself or a week complaining about how unfair life is. When your investments drop, the situation requires you to review your strategy. Determine if anything fundamental has changed about your long-term plan. It doesn't require you to check your account balance every hour or call your financial advisor in a panic. This separation between emotion and action is the difference between people who recover from financial setbacks and people who spiral into worse problems. Your feelings are valid, but they're not instructions. This is mindfulness applied to money management. So how do you actually apply this in real life? Here's something that will change how you think about money forever. The Stoics believed that every obstacle contains the seeds of equivalent opportunity, but only if you approach it correctly. They had a phrase for this: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This isn't motivational poster philosophy. This is practical reality for building wealth. Every financial crisis creates opportunities that didn't exist before. When everyone else is panicking and making emotional decisions, rational actors can find incredible deals. When companies are cutting costs, they're also looking for efficient solutions. When industries are disrupted, new niches open up. When credit is tight, cash becomes king. The 2008 financial crisis destroyed millions of people financially, but it also created more millionaires than any other period in modern history. The difference wasn't luck, it was perspective. While most people saw only problems, a few people saw problems that needed solving. They bought assets when everyone else was selling. They started businesses when everyone else was playing it safe. They invested in themselves when everyone else was cutting back. This requires what Stoics called the discipline of perception, the key to seeing opportunities in the middle of financial chaos. You train yourself to see opportunity in obstacles, advantages in setbacks, and strength in struggle. Not because you enjoy suffering, but because suffering is inevitable, and you might as well extract value from it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Your thoughts about your financial situation are more important than your actual financial situation, because your thoughts determine your actions, and your actions determine your results. And here's the most powerful application of this wisdom. Let me tell you about the most counterintuitive piece of Stoic financial wisdom. When you're in crisis, your instinct is to hold on tighter to what you have left. You become protective, defensive, risk-averse. You stop investing, stop learning, stop taking any chances. The Stoics taught the opposite principle. Voluntary discomfort leads to involuntary comfort. This is the foundation of anti-fragile growth. When times are tough, that's exactly when you should be investing more in yourself, not less. Seneca was forced into exile and lost most of his wealth. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, he used the forced simplicity to write his most important works. Those writings eventually made him more famous and influential than he ever was as a wealthy advisor to emperors. When you lose your job, instead of just looking for another job, develop skills that make you unemployable. When your investments lose value, instead of pulling out, learn more about investing so you can make better decisions. When money is tight, instead of cutting all expenses, invest in things that will make you more money later. This is auto-discipline applied to finances. This seems crazy when you're stressed about money, but it's based on a profound understanding of how value is created. Your future wealth doesn't come from protecting what you already have. It comes from becoming more valuable. And the best time to become more valuable is when everyone else is focused on preservation. While they're playing defense, you're building offense. While they're cutting costs, you're developing capabilities. While they're waiting for things to get better, you're making yourself better. This principle has created more fortunes than any other single strategy, but it requires the kind of long-term thinking that most people abandon the moment they feel threatened. So let me ask you something that might be uncomfortable. Right now, in this moment, what are you trying to control that you actually can't control? What are you spending mental energy on that you have zero influence over? And more importantly, what could you be focusing on instead that would actually improve your situation? The Stoics understood that financial freedom isn't really about money. It's about freedom from the need to make decisions based on fear, desperation, or other people's expectations. It's about having enough clarity and confidence to see opportunities when everyone else sees only problems. It's about building the kind of character that attracts resources instead of repelling them. This doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen accidentally. It requires daily practice of mental disciplines that most people never develop. But here's what I want you to understand. Every financial crisis you've survived has made you stronger, whether you realize it or not. Every time you've lost something important and figured out how to rebuild, you've proven to yourself that you're more resilient than you thought. The Stoics didn't avoid suffering. They used suffering to build anti-fragility. They became stronger, not in spite of adversity, but because of it. Your next financial challenge isn't just something to survive. It's something to leverage. The question isn't whether you'll face financial difficulties. The question is whether you'll be ready to turn those difficulties into advantages. And that preparation starts now, while things are relatively calm. Not later when the storm hits. Financial freedom isn't about having more money. It's about having more control over yourself. I want to know which piece of philosophical wisdom has actually helped you through a tough financial situation. Was it learning to focus only on what you could control? Was it practicing negative visualization to reduce your fears? Was it finding opportunity in obstacles? Drop a comment and let me know, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And if this perspective on financial resilience resonated with you, subscribe to keep feeding your millionaire brain with wisdom that actually works. Hit that like button if you felt real value here. And remember, your financial future isn't determined by what happens to you, it's determined by how you respond to what happens to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.